Welcome back to Together, a higher ed podcast. I'm your host, Chase Hagood. Today I'm joined by Richard Preiss, the president of the Academic Senate and associate professor in the Department of English here at the University of Utah. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks for having me, Chase.
We're really glad that you're here. We've taken a little bit of a pause. I don't know if viewers and listeners may have noticed, but we are back at it now together. And we're going to begin here our conversation as we do with a lot of folks, just to ask you a little bit about for you to share, I should say, a little bit about your journey in higher education. What got you interested in it? Did you know a lot of folks that had gone to college or to university and you were following in footsteps? Were you forging your own path through it? What did that look like?
That's a great question to lead off with. It's an important one because I think people take a lot of different paths to get to higher education. For a lot of people, it's in their family and in their blood. In my case, I am the only person in my family not to have gone to higher education, to college. Both my parents were college graduates. My brother got a PhD in biomedical engineering. He's now a medical doctor. But I'm the only person in my family that I know of who went to school in a humanities subject. This was very much frowned upon. I got a lot of resistance from my parents. Like, okay, well, it's nice that you're majoring in English, but you'll apply to law school at some point, right?
Right, yeah.
I could tell you if we're having drinks, the story of why I did not end up going to law school. It involves a bad sitting of the LSAT exam and a motorcycle gang in a small town in southwestern Ontario. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, and I went to the University of Toronto, which is a lot like the U in many respects. It's a large urban campus. I think at some point it was in the top 10 or top 5 largest universities in North America. It was very much a kind of you're a number experience. There's not a lot of personal contact with professors. I took all the wrong classes from all the wrong people, had no guidance, and sort of stumbled my way into graduate school, mainly because I realized, I was good at this. And graduate school was just something that would allow me to keep doing it. I didn't really have a plan for
a continuation of interest. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, you mean I can keep doing this? There's more runway.
Yeah.
Only when I got into a doctoral program did I realize, I've joined the Army. This is my career now because there's only one ramp that this leads to, and it's a career in higher education teaching.
Yeah.
How I got into the PhD program was also involved a lot of luck. I went to Stanford for a master's degree. The master's degree was supposed to be terminal. I somehow talked my way into submitting an application for the PhD program. They said, okay, well, we haven't admitted any doctoral candidates direct from the master's program in about 40 years, but we'll take a look at yours. And I guess I did work that was good enough to impress the right people. I wrote some gargantuan, sweaty 50-page paper on Milton's Paradise Lost.
Nice.
And they admitted me. The more interesting story is how I decided to be a specialist in early modern literature.
Yeah.
Because I initially went to grad school thinking what I really was passionate about was postmodern fiction. I wanted to study contemporary American fiction. And then was forced to take a Milton course. This was, where this paper came from. And I realized that all the questions that I was interested in about contemporary literature and contemporary fiction were already active in the Renaissance. They were thinking about the same things, but it was a much more finite archive just because we don't have as much.
Yeah.
No one's making any more Renaissance literature. That chapter has closed. And it was a literary period, I realized, over which one could eventually attain a measure of expertise, rather than feeling like in the contemporary landscape, all you could do was just carve out a tiny little postage stamp-sized piece of territory for yourself, and that's what you knew.
Yeah.
And so I completed my PhD at Stanford, applied for jobs in 2004, 2005, as one did, and still does, but the market was healthier back then.
Sure.
And Utah was the first and best job that I got. And it turned into the only job that I've had since. I've been here 20 years in the Department of English and have been extremely happy. I have wonderful colleagues, great students, and I really love this university.
I love that. I mean, and in a moment, if I can, we'll dive into a little bit about the change that you've observed in those 20 years. On this podcast, we've had a couple of folks who have seen kind of the longer arc of the University of Utah and of higher ed kind of writ large, so we can zoom in and zoom back out as we go. I wonder, you mentioned, or I mentioned in intro, your work not only in the Department of English as a now longtime faculty member at the university, but also work at the Academic Senate. And especially not just scholarship, long time kind of engagement in the university, but in particular kind of leadership. We've come to know each other, I think, better through your leadership of the Academic Senate. I think for viewers and listeners, could you say a little bit about the structure of Senate, the way the Senate kind of operates, the shared governance role that it plays, and in particular, how it contributes to this larger kind of commitment we have as an institution to student success?
Sure. So the short answer, which will lead to a very long answer, I think, is that almost everything the Academic Senate is and does and is about is conducive to student success, or is oriented toward that. And the work of the Senate encompasses an astonishing variety of things I've discovered. So I'll start by explaining what the Academic Senate does, why it's there. I'm going to assume that that's not self-evident to all your listeners and viewers. So almost from their inception, universities set themselves up to run according to a model of governance that's different from just about anything else you find anywhere. I mean, particularly useful contrast is with corporations, modern corporations. Corporations follow a hierarchical top-down structure. All the global strategy flows generally from the CEO down to their subordinate officers. Those officers report in kind back up to the CEO. The CEO can oust them at any time, is free to overrule them. And like, unless there are shareholders and there's a board, there are not a lot of checks on the CEO's power. Universities are set up differently. On a fundamental level, they recognize that the people who run the university are not necessarily the same people who make the university run. If I'll just say what I mean about
say more
that
about
distinction.
That. Yeah.
So the faculty, the students, to an extent, the support staff, these are sort of the people who are doing the essential day-to-day work of the university, but they're not necessarily the ones who make the large-scale decisions about the directions the university is going to take. So there's kind of a difference between the operations of the university and its core mission. Fun tangent: the history of the medieval university is replete with instances of like the faculty and the students defying administration to a certain extent, and in some cases like local authorities when they were denied the protection that they needed or the autonomy that they wanted. So like in Paris in 1200, where the University of Paris, we know it as the Sorbonne, one of the students of the Sorbonne was in a local shop buying something and got swindled by a shopkeeper. And the student was irked about this, brought back some of his friends. So they returned and vandalized the shop. And the shopkeeper, along with the provost of the university, that's the French word, and a police force sort of invaded the campus, stormed the campus, and brutalized the students and killed some of them. And in solidarity with the students, the faculty went on strike. And they just said, we're not going to teach anymore. We're threatening to vacate the city. And the king, Philip II, I think, eventually relented. And he issued a decree that recognized that the faculty and the students together formed what he called a corporate body. And the Latin word for this was universitas. This is where the word university comes from. And it recognized that the faculty and students are linked, that an attack on one was an attack on the other. A similar dispute happened in 1209 in England at the University of Oxford, which was the only university at the time. And what happened there was, I think it was another dispute with a shopkeeper. And students banded together with the faculty. They went on strike. They did not get their demands met. And so they just said, we're leaving. So a contingent of faculty and students left Oxford, journeyed about, I want to say 80 miles east-northeast, and founded the University of Cambridge.
Yeah.
So like that's the story of why there's two universities for centuries in England, because the second university in England begins as a result of a protest at the first by faculty and students operating in concert. Last anecdote, in Paris in 1229, this one begins a little differently, not with a shopkeeper, but with a drunken bar fight involving students. So even in 1229, students are going to student. And as a result of this bar fight, royal forces swept through the student quarter. They arrested scores of students. But it turns out that this wasn't really about a bar fight. The king had heard disturbing reports that the university was teaching illicit content, illicit texts and authors like Aristotle, Averroes, who were philosophers that were really suspect. And so the bar fight, policing the bar fight was an excuse to actually police the curriculum of the university and a pretext for nationalizing the university. So the faculty and the students responded the way that we've already seen in this pattern. They went on strike for 2 years. They threatened to vacate the city for 6 years. The royal family kind of realized this was a losing battle. The university was really important to the life of the city at this point. And finally, it was the Pope who interceded and declared that the university had the authority to self-regulate, that it was a kind of a separate entity within the city, and they should be granted the intellectual freedom to teach and to study whatever they deemed fit. So this is really, as far as I am aware, the origin story of academic freedom. It starts in 1229 with the bar fight. And weirdly, ironically today, with like the concession made by a religious leader in favor of academic freedom. But what it fundamentally recognizes is that universities represent this kind of utopian experiment, a utopian social experiment, where we agree that we're going to plant within cities and within countries these little engines of dissent and sometimes disruption and sometimes disorderliness, because we also recognize that they're engines of innovation. They're engines of free thinking. They're where progress comes from. There's already an investment being made in the idea of progress. And the price of that progress is recognizing that at a university, education and freedom of thought are paramount. They take priority over all other values, even those of the king and the Pope. So that tradition, this is a long way around to answering your question, that tradition of independence and self-regulation is still carried on by universities today. And the term we use for it is shared governance. It's the principle that the faculty and the students, the groups most essential to the university's core mission of teaching and research, should have a say and a share in the decisions about that university, especially the decisions that affect those core activities of teaching and research. So generally, faculty and students are too busy on a day-to-day basis doing those things to participate in that process. But in the case of the Academic Senate, their representatives meet once a month and they hear reports from the administration about how that mission is going, and they advise, based on their expertise, what they think about those directions. And just a point of terminology, I say academic senate. A lot of other universities maintain faculty senates or faculty councils. Sometimes there's an important distinction there. Ours is an academic senate, and that's it's a larger, more Catholic category, and I'm really proud of that. It includes not just faculty, but students, and we'll talk about them more later on, staff, and also even members of the administration, because it recognizes that we're all on the same team. This is not an adversarial relationship. So rather than the corporate model, think of this as one where there's a system of checks and balances. So faculty and students on the Academic Senate are working in tandem with the administration to solve problems on all levels of governance, like we're faculty staff committees on athletics and admissions and the benefits you get with health insurance. I mean, we have a committee for that. We have committees for parking, and the review standards for professors, importantly. All of that is shared governance, and it's happening in myriad places on the campus at myriad levels. the academic senate is kind of the top of that pyramid. It's where shared governance is modeled most visibly and most prominently, because it's where the whole university really convenes and has those conversations about the decisions we're making collectively for our shared mission. So how does all of this relate to student success? It comes back to that core mission. The essential product, if you want, I'm reluctant to say that universities produce a product, but the product is education.
Yeah.
And if what students are trying to succeed at, when we talk about student success, is getting an education, the prime function of the academic senate is to safeguard the value of that education, to make sure that the education they're getting retains a value in both an economic sense and also a human sense. So every change to the curriculum that the university offers, every change in curriculum that a department offers, is something in which the whole university has a stake. And so all of those proposals come through the academic senate, and they're subjected to scrutiny. So if a department were to say, and this is a totally hypothetical example, you know what, we get rewarded for the number of students that we attract and the number of students that we graduate. Why don't we make the path as easy as possible? We're not going to have the students read anything or write anything. We're just going to have them eat cotton candy and watch movies all day. The Senate would have something to say about that and say like that you are actually doing a disservice to all the other students at the university whose degrees are printed on the same paper. Yep. So that's an absurd example, obviously, but a more mundane one and a more recent one involves AI. So with the advent of AI over the last few years, we've seen an explosion in AI teaching and almost an arms race in the effort to integrate AI teaching into curricula. Just in the last year that I've been president of the Senate, we've seen a new minor in AI from the School of Business, which focuses on AI applications to business tasks like data analytics and predictive modeling, all those things. A new major in AI from the School of Computing, a whole new bunch of emphases in AI. So suddenly AI is everywhere. So the Senate has to ask questions like, what kind of knowledge should constitute a degree in AI? What does it mean to offer this degree in a field that did not exist when the students who are graduating today or will be graduating in a couple of months began their college experience? And that might be unrecognizably transformed by the time the students who are entering college today are graduating.
Right.
So how do you control for a field that's that young and that volatile?
Yep.
How much of their coursework should concentrate on mere technical competence, like how to use this tool, and how much of it should involve larger, more global questions, like when to use this tool, why to use this tool, what are the environmental and social and ethical costs of using the tool?
Yep.
So it always comes down to the question of how much are we training members of a future workforce and how much are we training members of responsible members of future communities that we ourselves have to live in. This is what the work of the Senate always comes down to, and in a sense, what the value of a higher education degree is always pegged to.
Yeah. A lot there. I mean, I think, and really good stuff. I mean, I think 2 points that I'd make really quick and ask you to follow up, Richard. I think having watched the work of the Senate and at previous institutions, university councils, et cetera, like governing bodies, taking the work that you've outlined there, taking it really seriously. I mean, in its sitting or standing committees, and I'm privileged to, in a shared governance role of chairing the undergraduate council, seeing those proposals move forward and advance to executive committee and on to Senate, seeing those kind of as they're in development, advising in on them, saying, wait a second, or this is looking great, continue forward, and trying to do so responsibly and timely and all that. I think 2 points come to mind really quickly on student success. And one of those, if I can harken back to 1220 or 1229, when that comes ashore, right, in the American colonies and then an early United States, like a core commitment, right, of the national identity is that wait a second, higher education has a very critical role, to your point about not only workforce, but community and self, and perhaps those two kind of mutually reinforcing ideas, right? Particularly in the United States, early on and even now, 250 years later, the idea of democratic self-governance requiring that it wouldn't be a bad thing, right? In fact, it'd probably be a very good thing if we had an educated citizenry to self-govern.
Yes.
Which links up in a way to
That's
this
true.
to this idea of like faculty and students and administrators and, friends of the institution, supporters, donors, alumni, all these constituent groups who care very deeply and are committed in a variety of different ways to the success of the whole enterprise. And I mean, one of the things that we'll get to at the close of this conversation, but I'll preview it. It's like how we do that ongoing here at the University of Utah for 175 years, right? Others, my alma mater is the birthplace of public higher education in the United States, founded in 1785. The way that University of Georgia, go Dogs, the way that we think about,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, UNC, anybody at UNC is going to watch this and be like, yeah, we
Challenge
graduated. Yeah, them and William and Mary, they'll both challenge it, but they're both wrong. Check the charter.
I thought it was William and Mary, but
Yeah,
it
was a private at that point. It was not a public. But anyway, public higher education in the United States, born out of Athens, 1785.
Fittingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that we think about what the role of that we each play, and I wonder what you make of this. Like, I'm working with this theory pretty constantly with my leadership team and working with students and working with all kinds of folks, system offices, and just an immense amount of I'm really lucky to be doing the work that I do. But part of that, what it comes down to, at least for me, is the idea that we all have a leadership role to play from various, where we find ourselves, to your point about corporate,
Yes.
if it's in a really hierarchical kind of design, or if it's in a more kind of flattened organizational structure, one in which many people have a hand on the steering wheel, that in one way or another, leadership is getting expressed, like those students, in a bar fight, alongside, and perhaps maybe with, or I don't know if it's for, with, or of faculty and locals or whomever, town gown relations kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They're expressing their interests, right? They're expressing their view. And you flash that forward to, I don't know, founding in America, or even I studied the 1830s, and you got similar kind of bar fights on the southern frontier at a university. And it's the same kind of set of tension that, I don't know, for me, and then I'm going to shut up and let you answer the question. That tension isn't necessarily a bad thing. That the tension, from my perspective, if you've got leadership working at multiple different levels, and tension or disagreement, for me at least, I wonder what you make of it. Here's my premise, that the tension or disagreement is actually a sign of commitment and of passion. That without it, without any of that, there wouldn't be, the way that you described it earlier, I'd add to this seed bed, right, of curiosity.
Right.
That is unique to a college or a university. And without the kind of tension or the disagreement that does more often than not produce innovation and insights and pushes us to the edge of what we have known to what we could know through the research enterprise, through teaching and the like. I think a lot of folks just want to avoid it. Right? And at the same time, I think, for me at least, avoiding that means that you aren't getting the kind of product or the output that you do with it. I don't know what you make of that, Richard, just in terms of the governance piece.
I completely agree with everything that you've said. And you've also sketched a beautiful kind of history of the West, really, or at least over the last 1,000 years or so.
Right.
That interbraids the evolution of liberal democracies with higher education and the proliferation of institutions of higher education, and argues that they're inseparable,
right?
Because they really are where individualism is forged.
Yeah.
Right? What you've just suggested, and I completely agree with it, is that whether it's in 1229 and a bar fight going on in Paris, or in, what year is it? 2026?
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track. In a classroom where students are debating with each other, almost the founding premise of every university is that everybody at the university at once believes that they're right, or at least capable of arriving at the correct answer.
Yep.
It's about questioning authority and trying to assume a position of authority, understanding that you too can be an authority on something.
Right.
And also recognizing that since everyone else, if you sort of follow this theory of mind,
Yeah.
everyone else is operating on the same assumptions, that we need to work out terms on which to have productive conversations and to arrive at some resolution, some idea of what the way forward is collectively.
Yep.
That it is about bringing people together to stage conflicts of ideas, because that's always a better alternative than conflicts of arms.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love that vision of the university as a place where we do disagree. I mean, disagreement is the fuel of everything that we do.
Right.
Whether it's we disagree with previous research that we're going to overturn, we disagree with our interlocutor in class.
Yep.
I feel like this is a case that needs to be made more often and more forcefully to some of the critics of higher education, who feel that somehow it's antithetical to the values of the West. I mean, it is the West. This is how we got here.
Yeah.
Universities are mitochondria
Yep.
within the cell body of every Western society.
Yep.
It's one of the beautiful things about them.
Yeah, and that it isn't contrary
Yeah.
to the core notion of, well, when I teach the U.S. history as a historian, I teach the survey. I enjoy teaching the general education, the history 1700, and when I do that, like I say to students, like we have to be, all of us, me included, we have to be ready to we are going to throw around some very sharp ideas, particularly those around like notions of self and of society and of what does freedom actually mean? How does that definition kind of wax and wane over time, particularly in the American experiment, that, even the founding generation would continually refer to as an experiment in self-governing.
Yeah.
And that experiment required, disagreement like even before they got out of the gate. And that just it continues on.
Yeah.
And that is, I like the way you describe it, that is the fuel, in fact, of how, we think about what progress can look like. And how that's defined very differently by different folks who would say, well, wait a second, that's not progress for me. That might be progress for you. And it's like, right in that spot.
Right.
That's where we got to focus in on and see if there are new truths to be discovered.
Right.
Right.
Rather than just inherited ones.
Right.
It seems like a very American idea.
Right.
Yeah, that higher education is intimately connected with. The problem we've run into as an institution, not just our university, but all universities, is that in some ways we're the victims of our own success over the last two generations. The victory of higher education in North America is the democratization of it, and that it has become the new norm for everyone. I mean, the model of education that you and I have been talking about is in some sense an older one that presupposes the liberal arts education, in the means the strict meaning of liberal, right? This is for someone who is free to study whatever they want because they're not bound by economic need to, enter a job, enter their father's trade immediately.
Yep.
Now that the expectation is that everyone goes to college has to eventuate in a job somehow. And this is foisted onto higher education expectations that are not entirely compatible sometimes with its sense of itself.
Yep.
And we're in the generations now that are trying to figure out how to harmonize those two things.
Right.
It's a moment of crisis, but it's also a moment of real opportunity to reinvent the idea of the university.
Yep. I was going to say a moment of a kind of opportunity that, if seized, which requires a lot of attention and a lot of calling on some of those earlier strengths, right, that we've been describing, that we're ready-made to be able to have. I mean, you want to have an argument, go to a university, find some faculty wherever they may be, find students wherever they may be, and, I believe X. Well, I understand you believe X, but there may be all kinds of other folks that believe Y and Z. Why is that? All right? Discuss. We're ready-made then to have a conversation about how do we do both things? How do we stay true to kind of core commitments of liberal education and see a readiness for folks to exit, for students, learners to exit then the institution, ready for the world of work and ready to, in fact, remake the world of work.
Yes. Right.
Right? And even that as a paradigm to try to think about. I had a mentor once say to me at another institution, he was in conversation with a lot of corporate folks, and he came out of the meeting, and we were having a meeting following that when he said to me, I just came out of this meeting. I won't mention the corporate group that he was with, but they said something like, well, we want you to produce students to do X in our corporate environment. And his description to them was, that's great for some of our students. So he's already trying to think about, the wide swath, to your point, of, the great opportunity that we have of educating a far wider range, both, in almost every single way that you could describe it, right? Diversity to the nth degree, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, nationality, background, you name it. So he's like, yeah, that's true for some of our students. But for some others of our students, he kind of leaned into the conversation and was like, I want them to be educated so that they question core operating principles of your own corporation so that in about a decade, they create the next company that's going to put yours out of business.
Right.
And if that isn't, what's more American than that?
Educating disruptors.
Right.
Right.
And people that are going to push the boundaries to say, let's see what we can do, right, with our time on this planet. And one of those, I find, if I can follow up on something you said earlier, which I think it's quite, and we're just seeing it everywhere. The ubiquity of AI at present. Tressie McMillan Collum, who I imagine you know, out at UNC Chapel Hill, sociologist. Tressie, I read everything you've written. I follow you everywhere, Tressie. Had this great comment last weekend. I don't know where she was, but she was on video, and somebody took the video and it got onto LinkedIn and everybody's loving it. And she's talking about the kind of inevitability of AI, that we're assuming, right, that AI is going to do all of these things and will in some way create just an unavoidable conflict with humanness. And what I have really enjoyed about the degree programs and the emphases that we have put forward as an institution, and with the Responsible AI Initiative and so many other things that we're moving forward with as the University of Utah, has been, we're quite willing to have those very important and almost essential kind of conversations about the role of AI from, to your point, from the technical aspects all the way across to ethics, responsibility, the moral kind of questions and environmental and sustainability kind of questions that are just present. They're not like, in 5 years we should have to be thinking about. No, they're right here in front of us, right in the present moment. That we've seen that develop. We've had those. I've watched them. You've shepherded the conversation as we go through Senate meetings, and they bubble up all the way through the governance structures as we've gone along. Thoughts about that too? The way that AI, you're seeing it impact not only fields of study, but learning and the university as we know it, and your own field.
There's so much to respond to in what you said. I'll try to work my way back toward it by beginning with your last question. In addition to being president of the Academic Senate, I'm still theoretically maintaining my duties as an associate professor in the English department. I'm currently advising a master's student who's writing a thesis, hey Sydney, on AI and literature. And she's doing a sort of weird transhistorical sweep, like she's talking about Hamlet, and she's also talking about Ishiguro's Clara and the Sun. I've been naturally specializing more in the Hamlet part of it. Hamlet's all about AI, by the way.
Nice.
I'm going to break some news here. Happy to talk about that later on. But a fascinating phenomenon just happened in our last meeting. One of her other professors who's co-supervising this thesis ran the draft that Sydney had produced of her introductory chapter through an AI detection software, and it came back as like 100% AI. And she was completely mystified by this because she was practically in tears saying, I wrote this. I mean, I don't understand. And we went through it, and the AI detection software identifies particular phrases that are, really hotspots for, that are tells for AI generation. And not surprisingly, it's like sentences having to do with AI. Because I think students are being asked to write about AI so much. AI is producing all this stuff. So it was sentences like, AI exhibits patterns of. I'm like, well, how are you supposed to talk about AI then? But there's also a larger problem of, well, step back and think here. The training data for AI is the whole sum of human knowledge and thought and expression, right? We're feeding it libraries of everything that humans have written. What's going to happen when AI becomes indistinguishable from human writing? Are we going to have to force ourselves to adapt our writing style to write in a different way to distinguish ourselves from AI, almost the way that painting changed after the advent of photography? Because we can't do that anymore. Like photorealistic representation is dead now. But AI creates this circular problem of like, it's trying to imitate humans. What is the human now? I think this actually creates a huge opportunity for universities as places that are tasked with training both people who can do the job today, and as you described, people who can reinvent the job 10 years from now, since AI is accelerating that whole process.
Right.
AI is gobbling up all the jobs, or will be soon. And maybe this is what was meant by the inevitability of AI.
Yeah.
All the jobs that require a bare minimum of human creativity or none at all, where you're more or less generating template text.
Yep.
AI can do that now. The pressure is on us to go back and reinvent the human and figure out what kinds of labor humans are good at that AI can't do well yet, possibly will never do well. I mean, we've given ourselves a race against our own technology. Universities are the places to figure that out.
Yep.
So the Academic Senate has been instrumental, and I hope, in helping the administration have conversations and do some long-term strategic thinking about, do we want to have just an AI program over here, an AI program over here, have it all be discipline specific, and then just end up with a proliferation of largely redundant programs that involve some of the same core courses? Or do we want to consolidate those courses or possibly build it into our general education so that this is now part of being a college graduate, is you need to understand what AI is for, what it's not good for, and what is different about you.
Yeah.
It seems like the new plateau from which education needs to be built.
Yeah. There's some really, the transdisciplinarity of that work, which, coming out of the 1990s and early 2000s, like, whoa, let's design whole interdisciplinary kind of units. And even of late, a couple of folks have written about how we don't even need academic departments, right? We shouldn't have, we should totally redesign and reorganize. Again, a conversation that I don't think any of us have to be afraid of. Like, let's have that. Let's have that conversation, right? I think part of that too, the definition of what is humans' relationship, not just to each other, which, sociologists and anthropologists and historians and so many folks, well equipped to have that conversation and have for quite some time. What is humanity's relationship to technology in this way? And then what's the future then of work and the future of what is responsible citizenry?
Yeah.
What is it like to live in a democratic republic in which AI is infused into, so much of our lives, including what does it look like and what are the questions that we should ask in terms of, the body politic and the way that we think about not just ethics, but of faith and of, life and of art. And the list just kind of goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And maybe the last thing to say about this, and it goes back to the question of inevitability. We are also talking about this as if this is just, the cat's out of the bag.
Right.
It's going to get everywhere. We are still a civilization, and we can make collective decisions about what's in our best interests, rather than act as though the whims of a few billionaire tech CEOs are going to determine the course of human history, whether we like it or not. I mean, we have the choice to adopt or not to adopt. I'm proud to be part of a body that is modeling that kind of deliberative thinking, even if it's only on the level of an institution. But it's a place where, and to get back to disciplinarity, you can kind of recognize, okay, well, this discipline has an investment in this thing. It's a threat to this discipline. What kinds of reorganizations are necessary? To what extent is disciplinarity a figment or a fiction, an administrative fiction, just to make managing a university possible?
Right.
It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be in the academy, even though usually that's going to feel like terror to most of us. I think a lot of us in my generation entered the academy with the promise of the previous generation that this was just a really lovely way to spend your life, teaching a very stable set of texts that weren't likely to change. And the rate of change has increased exponentially. It's a scary time, but it's also an exciting one.
Yeah, well, really, really well put. And I think the inevitability piece, I think, quite right. I mean, Macmillan Cotham's point of many, well, the one that has kind of stuck with me and I've been thinking about for the last 7 or 8 days, and thanks for letting me pull it into our conversation. I wanted to hear what you thought about it, is that there are a lot of power interests in play for us to shape our thinking, a narrative kind of thread that would say, no, this is here and now, and it's a good thing. And not to say that there aren't parts of it that aren't good. I mean, it has sped up a lot of work. It's made greater efficiencies. I think the ability to have conversations about trade-off, about what comes next, about what shouldn't come next, are all really important kind of elements of an overall conversation that, again, universities and colleges are one of the very best places to have that kind of debate. I want to turn, if I can, to student voice, because I think it naturally kind of fits even within the flow of this, because as too often, there was a whole digital native kind of thread of thinking about, the students today. Often, this is one of my pet peeves, but often that comes with like an N of one. It's a parent. I've got my 5-year-old, but it's a parent who's got a kid or had a kid in college, or their niece or nephew, whomever. And the whole kind of theory of like, students come up on iPads, they came up with Facebook or Instagram or what have you. Therefore, and we just kind of make these leaps and assumptions into then, well, of course they know how to convert a Word doc into a PDF and submit that on Canvas. Of course they know how to. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. There are a lot of folks that don't know how to do just the task that I described, get from a Word doc to a PDF to an upload. The student voice, let me get back to that. The student voice, how do we ensure that student voice, student presence, student perspectives, plural, are incorporated into the work of a modern university, up to the academic senate, up to the way in which we think about doing the work both for and with students?
This has been one of the most encouraging and gratifying aspects of my role this year, is getting to work with student senators, realizing that, despite what you were referring to earlier, the always anecdotal reports of, the imminent demise of humanity because this next generation doesn't, they can barely be bothered to breathe. No, I mean, actually, those reports are exaggerated. I find students are more politically engaged now than ever. They are indefatigable, they're smart, they're organized. I'll start by saying the Academic Senate, I mentioned earlier, is composed of many different groups. Faculty is the largest, but students are the second largest. I think I want to say have 17 seats on a body of 125. So that's like, I'm going to do some math on the fly, but it's like close to 15%. You can fact check me later. Hope that's right. That's a pretty large share, and they also make up a very large share of the Senate's executive committee, which is kind of the brain trust inside the Senate that sets the agenda for every Senate meeting. There are 3 student seats on there, and they're very vocal participants in those meetings, including the ASUU president, Alex Rose. And I'm going to single out for praise one of the other ASU senators, Pamela Tara Fenn. Hey, Tara. So recently, this will be an example of student involvement in governance. Pamela Tara is circulating a resolution in support of career line faculty. So your viewers and listeners may not be aware of the situation in Utah, but recently the Utah Board of Higher Education voted last fall to increase the teaching load of career line faculty from, I'm not going to bother with the actual units, but it translates from a 3-3 teaching load to a 4-4 teaching load. And for a lot of career line faculty, this is insupportable. It's not accompanied by any raise in compensation. So the Associated Students of the University of Utah and quarterbacked by Pamela Tara put together this resolution that they're now circulating through the faculty for signatures that comes out in support of career line faculty and registers to the administration that students are paying attention to this. It's not just a question of compassion. They recognize that a quantitative increase in the teaching load for faculty who do a large proportion of the teaching on campus is going to entail inevitably a qualitative dip in the education that students are getting, right? If you just can't teach 4 courses as well as you can 3, as well as you can 2. So they very much have their eye on the value of their education, just as the Senate tries to do.
Yep.
And they also make very concrete, realistic proposals to the administration about how to phase in this new Utah Board of Higher Education rule, how to reward career line faculty members equitably, should we be counting service differently? And the Senate actually, working along exactly the same lines, had a committee, an ad hoc committee organized this year to study that same problem, conducted a census of all the service that's happening on campus, that a lot of which is invisible because it's at the university level and departments don't really pay attention to things happening at that level. No one really had a sense of how many hours, what the labor output was to be part of these committees. And career line faculty have service expectations the same as tenure line ones. So how much of that work is not getting rewarded? How much overload service are these career line faculty members doing? And they likewise proposed, should there be some kind of conversion exchange into units of teaching eventually, like a certain amount of service eventually should tally up to teaching a course. I don't know that the university will adopt this, but if the more angles the university hears this from, maybe that message penetrates and somebody decides this is the thing we'll try to make happen.
Sure.
So I've been delighted at how much initiative the students show, how aware they are of everything that's going on campus. I think back to my own undergraduate experience, and I didn't know anything about anything. My professors, when the classroom was done, folded themselves up into supply closets and waited until the next class to emerge and teach. So I'm delighted at how mature these students are, and the Senate creates, I hope, a forum for students to share their concerns, not just on the subsidiary committees, but in the Senate itself, and we partner with them every chance we get.
Yeah, I will say this in my experience over the last year. Especially, I feel like I've been more active in terms of presentation to the Senate, both for EC and then with Senate as a whole, that ASUU and student senators ask some of the most precise kind of questions, not to say that the faculty reps or the staff reps don't.
No, you can say that.
But
they often don't.
I mean, those student representatives are very attuned to how we represent, how we as collectively as an institution show up and fulfill the kind of commitments that we've made to them as they arrive here, and then they make their way through the institution, and then they graduate. Mm-hmm. And I've had it's a privilege to sit down with a number of those students who follow back up and say, like, hey, you said you'd be willing to have a conversation. Is that real? It's like, yeah, it is.
Good for them.
And then they're like, so you're going to grab my coffee if I want? Yes, I will. Mm-hmm. And, an hour later, after over, a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, students saying like, well, I didn't get that. It's like, okay, I need to be clearer. And then them saying, oh, well, that's actually going to benefit students as well as faculty. Right. Yeah, that's the hope. And they're like, well, okay, well, I can get on board with that. And it's like, all right, one at a time, let's make the case, let's make it clearer, whatever. And I've always found that to be, especially here at Utah, to just be a really refreshing, their role in the governance work to be really worthy of kind of the way that we conduct ourselves, of the way that we do the work of being a university.
Mm-hmm. It's surprising how often students discover and faculty discover that their mutual interests are aligned.
Yeah.
I think students and faculty alike are trained to think of their relationship as sort of adversarial or antagonistic, like, faculty complain about the students complain about their professors. But usually what's good for one population is good for the other.
Yeah.
And the work of ASUU is where you see them figuring that out in real time. And it kind of goes back to the medieval stuff again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're going to do that to the students? The faculty have a stake in that.
Right.
The university is this constellation of really hardened, kind of unsplittable atom individuals who are all in the process of recognizing their bonds with each other and their shared, their aligned interests with each other.
Yep.
And it just kind of moves up in levels of complexity from the students to the faculty and so on.
Yeah, like if I can, like of that complexity as well as kind of awareness and consciousness, right? And they're all kind of evolving sometimes simultaneously, and at other times they're kind of like, one is like, well, wait a second. Oh, you have that same interest that I do. And it's like, right. And if we work through all of this together, whatever the complexity might be, it could benefit us all, like mutually benefiting the whole of the university community. When you see those kind of things click into place, it leads me to my penultimate question.
Okay.
Impactful work, without a doubt. I've had a front row seat to watching Senate in the last year. As you reflect, as your term as president soon flips over to past president.
I'm not even ready to hear that yet.
Right.
I'm just learning the job.
Yeah, right. Most impactful work. I mean, what do you see as the most impactful kind of work project? It can be a couple or like, what are you proudest of? Because you spend considerable amount of time, not just as associate professor and the work that you're doing there, guiding undergraduate, graduate students, but in this role in the Senate, as you reflect back, what are you thinking of now? And no doubt you'll continue through April and May thinking about that.
It's a good question, and it's an important question. Well, I've mentioned the ad hoc committee on career line and university service. I'm proud of that, but I've already spoken to that. There are a couple of other things I could mention, so I'll do a little rhetorical, legerdemain here and the occupatio movement. What I won't talk about is the Senate responded really nimbly to a change in legislation last spring that made it easier to open carry weapons on campus. There was a lot of alarm from faculty and students alike about what would the presence of a firearm in a classroom do to the discussion. How could you summon law enforcement to do a permit check in a subtle way that's non-confrontational? We've been working with the Department of Public Safety, with campus police to create a kind of alert system that runs through the Utah 360 app that allows you just do a kind of text-based conversation really quickly that shows up on the dispatch monitor. That hopefully disrupts the classroom as little as possible. Seems like a lot of the intent of some of that legislation is just purely to be disruptive of the educational project. That's all I'll say about that. I could say in connection to that, another thing I'm proud of, and this is really a hat tip to the administration, the partnership role that they've created for faculty and specifically faculty representatives in the academic senate in legislative relations. We just concluded a legislative session in which I got to work very closely with Vice President for Legislative Relations, Jason Perry, also of the Hinckley Institute, familiar to your audience. going to Capitol Hill, sitting in Senate committee hearings, testifying about particular bills. There are two bills that we were tracking particularly for their impact on the educational mission of the university. HB 204, which has to do with content accommodations and exemptions that students create for themselves for material that makes them uncomfortable, and SB 295, which prescribes, let's call it, ideological balance of the guest speakers that are invited to campus. Both of these are they're problematic not just in principle but in their practicability. So I'll set those aside and say what you want me to say, which is the number one thing that I'm proudest of. Hopefully we'll be able to say this officially within a few short weeks, is the comprehensive revision of Policy 6100, which is probably the centerpiece, the most important policy, the most important educational policy that we have on our books. It governs all instruction and evaluation on campus, so it's absolutely vital to everything that we do in the classroom. It touches every discipline and every department on campus. This is, as you well know, despite its centrality to our mission, a policy that has laid dormant for 30 years, or it's only been poked around the edges. It hasn't really undergone the full revamp that it needs. And a lot of those updates are really fundamental. I mean, they, again, are all conducive to student success. So, and you can chime in here because you know this hit list better than I do. Reorganizing the calendar into regularly scheduled class times or blocks, so that instructors can't deviate from that and say, "Oh, I like to go 30 minutes shorter or 30 minutes longer." I mean, students need to be able to plan out a regularized, predictable schedule that is conducive to student success. It also helps students who are commuting have to juggle their school and a job. What else does it do? I think it shortens the period for incompletes, which have a tendency to just kind of spiral out into oblivion, and thereby increases the burden that a case needs to meet for an incomplete to be justified. Right. We want to award less of these because they tend to squander all the work that the student has done in the course up until that point. And again, that benefits the students. Help me out here. What else? What am I missing? Grading deadlines. Grading deadlines. That's a big one. We had it so good. I mean, this is a case of where the faculty are actually like voluntarily undertaking a recession of their own freedoms on behalf of students. We had something like, a 17, 18-day grading period from the end of final exams. It lasted so long in the winter break that sometimes it would be after Christmas you were turning your grades in. You'd be lucky if you remembered that you had grades to submit. This is, of course, terrible for students because they go through the whole Christmas holidays not finding out how they did in their courses. They don't know what courses they may need to repeat, how to structure their schedule, and by the time they learn this, the new semester is already upon them. So we've now shortened that to 5 days. But of course, the most contentious aspect of this policy is the clause relating to course enrollment minimums. So this would allow the university to establish numerical thresholds below which sections of courses, if they don't enroll that number, are canceled and the instructors need to be reassigned. This has dominated the discussion. I think a lot of faculty members began by seeing this as a threat to their livelihoods, a threat to the sustainability of their disciplines, as attacking particular disciplines. And it's been a very long process, as you well know, because you've been my partner in this, and I really appreciate that. In getting both sides to come to the table, right? This has been a bilateral negotiation. Getting the faculty to recognize that the interests of the administration in managing the university effectively and allocating resources wisely are not incompatible with the research and teaching mission of the university. And likewise, getting the university to recognize what the concerns of the departments are.
Right.
And the compromise that we've arrived at, which I think is a really sustainable one, is that there will be a number, but there will be exceptions to the application of those cancellations.
Yep.
And those exceptions the authority for that will lie with departments and with department chairs in conversations with their deans.
Yep.
And so what we have is the administration trusting the university to regulate itself, just as, had to be fought for in 1229.
Yep.
I love that we keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
And likewise, the faculty entering into a contract with the administration saying, we are going to be accountable for our decisions. We live in the world, and this is an invitation for us, not a demand, but an invitation for us to rethink the courses that we're offering. If a course is not, quote unquote, making, I would say that.
Yep.
Why is that happening? Are we marketing our courses effectively? Have we designed our curriculum well? Is this an invitation for us to redesign it?
Yep.
Is this an invitation for us to engage more thoughtfully and aggressively with the public, to just remind people of what we do in each individual discipline and why it matters? That is a conversation that needs to be renewed all the time.
Yeah.
And this is a spur to it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know, but I very much hoped that 6100 would make it somewhere on the list of things. We certainly have spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of, a lot of just intellectual capacity working through, put under the banner of, can we do this better?
Mm-hmm.
And then, moving forward, stepping back, moving forward again, stepping back. And as you say, I think it's a when passes, not if.
I'm willing to say that.
Yeah, we're able to say, like, okay, we've made the concessions, the compromises were needed, frequently over the last 17 months or so, as I hope a really good demonstration of what the shared governance kind of core principles look like, with students at the table, with faculty, with staff, with administration, all coming together to say, like, well, do we understand this one piece? Oh, no, we didn't have that kind of consciousness or the awareness around that this piece matters in terms of the downstream, almost immediate downstream, like with grading deadline for financial aid implications for students.
Right.
And I will say, like, as soon as the faculty in the room, and then as the conversation broadened, it was like, oh, that impacts students in that way? Well, no, we can't keep doing it the way we've always done it then. We just didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it's like, right. So we have to take time occasionally to share that information with each other and then come to kind of compromise. I want to say thank you, Richard, for that. I think our ability to pretty regularly be like, okay, this is where we are. This is where I think we can get. How are we able to continue to try to bring people together? It has been both encouraging and renewing and refreshing in that, despite all the other things that may be going on in the world, even on a policy that folks would say, like, I think there's a reason that people hadn't tackled it in over 30 years.
Yeah.
Because nobody wanted to have the...
It's nightmarishly complex.
Right.
Politically...
fraught.
Incendiary. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, let's just leave that to the, next.
That'll be the next generation's problem.
Yeah.
But I love that we've tackled it now. It's going to do a world of good for students. And it is healthy for the university periodically to revisit itself and to, take a long, hard look at how it does things on a really practical and material level. It also functions as a reminder of how fiendishly complex a university is. I mean, for every case or that you are trying to legislate for or write policy for, there are a world of exceptions, because this is just such a busy campus, and there's so many different types of teaching that are going on that involve so many different types of resources. How do you account for all of them? You're never going to arrive at a perfect solution, but the beginning is always getting all the stakeholders into the same room and communicating. And that is the primary thing that the Senate does. It is the nerve center where the whole university talks to itself.
Yep. Without, if I can just add, the earlier part of this conversation, without fearing that disagreement or disruption. I mean, I think reflecting that back out into the world is one of the greatest kind of maybe one of the greatest things that we haven't fully articulated, that in some ways earlier guests and others have talked about, and certainly trade presses are full of it right now, around the distrust, right, in higher education. I think, having lived inside it, as you have, it's like, well, the fact that we're able to self-govern, take a policy that we enforce on ourselves and say, how do we make that better across all the constituent groups that are going to be held to that policy, and beyond the, course making language, the ability, I think policy, one of the things that I get most passionate about for policy is like, it is one of the clearest ways, believe it or not, I think policy should be clear, like, but it's one of the clearest ways that we express our values.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And if we believe that, grading deadlines, thresholds, CRs, NCs, E's, all of that matters, so that students, faculty, all of us can be on the same page together and understand the kind of proper functioning, and not just efficient functioning, but effective functioning of the institution is within our own power to set the terms, right? And to do so together. That gives me the bridge to our last question, if I can, which is, and we ask this to everybody, and forewarned of our sound coming in just a moment.
I'm looking forward to it.
How do we create, from all of your experiences, from all of your work, from things that you've seen, things that we haven't done, that we perhaps should have done, how do we create the kind of lasting transformative change that I think many people are eager for, some folks are fearful of, for a variety of good and perhaps not so good reasons, but how do we do that transformative change together?
Oh, I'm just taking a moment to admire this.
Right? How do we do it?
How do we do it? Well, your question, my answer to your question will sound some of the same themes that we've already touched on. But your question comprehends a lot of things, and I think builds into itself a sense of frustration slightly that we aren't always able to focus on those goals. A lot of the work of governance at this university, and a lot of it passes through Senate, is usually reactive rather than proactive. In our case, one of the realities of life in a red state, being a public R1, is that we're responding to what usually feels like just an inundation of fresh legislation every spring that has to be put into policy immediately over the course of the summer. And so we're reacting all the time. And again, the intent of a lot of that legislation is to be disruptive and to kind of tear at the fabric of the university. It's really difficult to find the resilience to withstand that. And it generates a lot of ill will. The same distrust of higher education that informs the spirit of some of that legislation ends up seeping down into the relations inside the university, between different precincts of the university. And I don't know where I think this is going to be an aquatic metaphor, but people have a tendency to kind of, direct their complaints upward, but as they naturally should, but they only go one level up because the one level is the only one that we're aware of. When most of us are doing our work in the university, we're really only aware of what's happening at the departmental level, the college level, sometimes the university level. And that's usually where it stops. And think of that as kind of the ceiling that you're looking at. Well, the ceiling is dripping. There must be a leak in the apartment upstairs. Like, oh, damn you, apartment upstairs.
Right.
And so faculty in particular, will have a tendency to blame the administration and to accuse it of having, this kind of agenda or that kind of agenda, not realizing, well, maybe the leak is actually coming from another floor above that one, or 2 floors above it, or from the roof. Maybe it's just raining.
Yeah.
And I've talked about the university as a microcosm of the world, as a kind of miniature society where students learn how to participate in a society before they go out into the so-called real world. That distinction is illusory, largely.
Yeah.
It has a tendency, conversely, to function as a kind of bubble that I think when you're in the university doing academic work, it can be very difficult to be aware of the forces that are impinging on the function of the university that are entirely external to it. The primary thing, so to answer the question of how can we create lasting transformative change together, is the together part of it. and recognizing that everyone in the university, I mean, regardless of how remote you think their values might be from your own, is so much more aligned with your vision for education and research than just about anybody outside of it.
Yeah.
And stopping the infighting, stopping making enemies with each other, approaching each other with goodwill and with an assumption of goodwill, that the person I'm interacting with is not a bad actor. My job is to figure out what their intentions are and to recognize, to find common ground, to recognize how our interests are actually aligned and compatible. Again, it starts with that relationship between students and faculty, always banding together, but it doesn't need to be banding together against the administration either.
Yeah.
In this case right now, what we probably need to recognize is that the university has stopped doing a good job of explaining what it does to the world outside of it. Or maybe the nature of that conversation has changed. A lot of friction has entered the equation that wasn't there before. A lot of there's misinformation that needs to be combated. I mean, there are public images of higher education as this kind of, I don't know, lazy, like chalk juggling activity that whenever you see a classroom classroom activity depicted on television, it's like the last 10 seconds before the bell rings.
Yeah.
Papers are due, like it makes teaching seem effortless. It seems like we just sort of roll out of bed and do what we do. I think universities always need to be in the business of explaining themselves to the public. I think every crisis is an invitation to revisit that mission. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back to 1229 again. I mean, I think that all those milestones are moments where the university needs to renegotiate its relationship to the world around it and persuade those stakeholders that there is value in this social experiment. And that starts first and foremost with everybody inside the university recognizing that we're on the same team.
Yeah.
So it's about getting people into the same room together, having conversations, being patient, and recognizing fundamentally, ultimately, and this is really the message I've worked to disseminate this year, shared governance is not inefficient. It is actually deeply efficient, right? It might look like it's taking a long time, but it means that you arrive at the best, most democratic, most egalitarian solution firmly and finally, and you don't need to go back to the drawing board a year later when you realize that, the disaster that has been produced by a hastily arrived at decision that hasn't got consensus behind it, that hasn't been socialized.
Yeah.
Universities are models of how we can govern ourselves, not just for universities, but as a society. So if we're going to teach that, we need to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And model it out to the world. I think to that one point, Richard, thanks for that. And again, thank you for your leadership. Thanks for,
you too.
There's a lot that goes into, shepherding the academic senate. I think I've watched you do it. I've watched your predecessor and, the incoming president-elect. I think that kind of engagement, something that you described there, the word that I hear within it is, do we want fast or do we want long-term sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are so many. I look around and there's so many people like you. I aspire to be one of them as well, who are doing everything that we possibly can to contribute to that kind of sustainable, future-oriented, future-proofed kind of institution that does model. It's one of the parts of the mission of the institution as the flagship of the state is to model that out to everyone else to say we don't agree on everything. And yet we are able to, keep the place moving forward for our students and for each other and,
right.
and for the state, we'll say nation and the world. I mean, because the things that maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I do think that the things that we, not just in the research enterprise and all the wonderful things and discoveries that are happening there, but to your point, how we model that, how we represent what leadership and collaboration looks like, I just have to believe. I just cannot not believe that has a spillover effect, that the students that carry with them and that we all carry with us into the rest of our lives, into our lives outside the institution.
That's my hope too. And it's been a pleasure working with you this year. Your leadership has been an inspiration for me as well.
I appreciate that, Richard. I really do. Thank you for that. Viewers, thanks for tuning in. This has been Together. Join us next time.